Okay. Are we ready? Okay. Oh, that's right. You're going to have to advance for me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So this is the title. I don't know how many of you are aware, but we published a current process benchmark for the last planner system in 2016. And that's when I say we, I mean P2SL at Project Production Systems Laboratory at the University of California, Berkeley, essentially me and Professor Iris Tomaline. And then we also have published a 2020 update of that benchmark. And that's what I want to talk about today, what's new in it. Okay, so next slide. So here's the big news. There's a lot in it, and I encourage you to look at it. And at the end of this presentation, I'll give you the link, and you can share that with everybody. The last planner system was created to be the system for planning and control of project production. And that has worked marvelously well, but there have been some problems with the omission of the functions involved in kind of managing the project, right, as a whole. And so with this 2020 current process benchmark, the last planner system is extended in principle to planning and control of the entire project, not only production. Okay. Next slide. So today I'm going to talk about validation, options, master control schedules, location-based work structures, and a somewhat new principle, since it hasn't been explicitly articulated, apply capacity first to critical tasks, okay? A behavioral rule, a principle. Okay, so the first topic, validation. Validation, I don't know if you're familiar with the use of that term, but basically it came into use as a way of talking about how project teams that were doing integrated project delivery collectively decide whether the project that they're planning to execute can be executed with acceptable risk to everyone who has a stake in the project. But it obviously has to happen on any kind of project, right? It may be a project where there's no shared risk and reward, but nonetheless, people have risk and reward. So the validation process be done well is a critical piece that has heretofore not been a part of the last planner system, right? And I'm not going to talk about that process as a whole, but just pick out some parts of it that are specific to planning, specifically planning and control. Okay. Okay, next slide. Okay.
And just
so
a comment.
Yeah, there's some builds in it. Right? Is that okay for you? That's okay.
Just a comment. Hedging work and buffering work often gets confused in translation. So if you could tell us a bit of the difference between buffering and hedging work.
Okay, I will. But let me first talk about pulling master schedules. So validation involves, you went ahead before. Validation involves many more things than scheduling, but it's one of the, at its heart, that's a big piece of it, right? And so the first thing we talk about in the new 2020 benchmark document, one of the things we talk about is how do we have to take on from the last planner, within the last planner system, the development of the project master schedule, which I call a project master control schedule, right? And you will see when you look at that document that many companies are now pulling the master schedule. And obviously that requires some form of collaborative arrangement, but it's been done very effectively, and we describe how that is done. I'm not going to do that today, okay? The second piece, identify risks. And basically what we do once we identify risks, we're looking to find out what needs to be avoided, right? What can we do to take away obstacles challenges to the project before at the beginning in the way that we structure the project, right? And the next type of risk is variations that are statistically predictable, and those can be buffered, right? And so we buffer when we add additional time to a phase of work because we're not quite certain how much time it's going to take for one reason or another. We buffer when we add, follow the last planner system rule that's always been there to underload in order to accommodate variation in execution time, right, of plans on last planner weekly work plan tasks, right? So is that a sufficient? And I'll talk about I'll talk about types of buffers in just a minute. But then the hedging is a technique that we use when in high levels of uncertainty for and uncertainty that cannot be statistically predicted, right? And if you can't statistically predict it, you really can't size a buffer, right? So you're just flying blind. But there are other ways of hedging, right, to accomplish the same kind of objective as buffering. And I will talk about those in terms of options. Okay. So then lastly, or not lastly, but next we have, let's see where I am. Okay, so the idea is that once we have identified risks and taken what action we can to avoid, buffer, or hedge, then we develop a project execution plan to take those actions, to take those steps, right? And then we assess that project plan to see if we can execute it with acceptable risk. That acceptable risk may be simply to the buyer, the owner, or it may be to the entire project team if it's a collaborative type of contract, right? Okay,
so
next
Glenn,
one.
A quick stop for translating.
Yep.
Los efectos principales que vemos acá es primero entender los riesgos, ¿cierto? Poder identificar qué riesgos pueden ser evitados en el fondo y mediante qué mecanismos, eso durante la etapa de pooling, de hacer el pool o la planificación de tiro del plan maestro. Identificar aquellos que conozcamos estadísticamente con suficiente detalle para poder dimensionar un buffer de recursos, de tiempo, de espacio, que nos permita, en el fondo, programar mejor la planificación, y cuando no podamos estimarlos, debido a la incertidumbre, la variabilidad y la falta de conocimiento específico, donde no podemos hacer estadísticas, y ahí hay que buscar mecanismos de protección que tienen que ser compartidos entre el owner, el cliente, y también, en el fondo, el equipo. Y si eso está ya en el fondo conocido y podemos determinar cuáles son los riesgos aceptables, se puede coordinar en las siguientes etapas de project delivery. Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so to go to hedging, one of the tools used to hedge, a hedge against a risk that's embedded in uncertainty, is called options, right? And you might be familiar with that from the world of financial, of investment, right? Investment in stocks and bonds, right? And so you can buy a call or a put option that gives you the right to buy or sell a stock or a bond at some future date for a price, for a given price, right? And so that's done for financial reasons, right? Trying to make more money. But it also can be used in the execution of projects, right? So forward. There's going to be a series of 6 bills, just to hang on. Okay, hold on. Okay, projects always have lots of uncertainties. For example, a major decision might be delayed or reversed during project execution. So you might ask, why not just add time to your schedules and money to your budgets? That is, increase project buffers, right, of time and money. But remember that waste is any cost item that can be eliminated without reducing value delivered. is buffering the best way to manage uncertainties that can disrupt a project schedule? Okay, and then to repeat myself slightly, but I think it's a key point. Buffering is a good way to handle uncertainties that are statistically predictable, so the right amount of buffer can be calculated. That doesn't work for delayed or changed decisions. Okay. Options are not free. Just think about your insurance premiums. Okay. So what I want to do here next is share a way of calculating or answering the question if the cost of an option is worth paying. So, right, options are not free, but it may, in some cases, be prudent, be the best solution in conditions of the project to pay a little bit more in cost and or time in order to avoid paying a lot more, right? So, translation. You can, if you want me to stop at smaller chunks, I'd be happy to do that so you can translate without having to remember so much. I can't hear you.
Opciones. Es un mecanismo bien similar a lo que se utiliza en el mercado financiero. Es una oportunidad de adquirir un riesgo o retorno en el futuro. No es una oportunidad gratuita, sino que tiene un costo. El símil sería, por ejemplo, cuando uno está pagando un seguro a cambio de transferir el riesgo, y eso te protege de la oportunidad de que ocurra ese riesgo. ¿Ya? Y eso funciona mejor que simplemente añadir buffers de tiempo y costo, lo cual aumentaría las pérdidas, y dado que el riesgo en el fondo tiene una probabilidad de ocurrencia que no podemos interpretar, no podemos cuantificar, en realidad en el fondo si aumentáramos mucho el buffer estaríamos produciendo pérdidas versus en el fondo frente a esos riesgos no predecibles, generar una opción en el fondo o una especie de seguro que sería el símil, en el fondo nos protege frente a esa eventualidad a un costo menor. ¿Ya? Y es más efectivo con buffer en este caso. Thank you, Glenn. You can go
Okay,
on.
thank you. Okay, next. Okay, so many of the changes in the 2020 benchmark document were developed by 5 teams, and those teams involved mainly industry practitioners, but also some academics, but knowledgeable academics. And one of them developed a case illustrating what options are and how to evaluate their worth to a project, right? So for that, we needed a real project in order to get real numbers, right? In terms of what the costs were and the amounts of time were, how time was allocated, right? And so that was done courtesy of Robinson Morton. They're a large regional contractor out of, I think, South Carolina. And they had recently completed a small hospital project for a client in the Northeast. And on that, we took the data from that project and constructed a case and a method around that case for calculating the benefits or worth of an option. Okay, you might want to just say that first, then I'll go on to more detail.
Ok, lo probaron, en el fondo implementaron una forma de evaluar estas opciones mediante 5 equipos que incorporaban practicantes de la industria y académicos. Se utilizó un caso para ilustrar en el fondo cómo utilizar estas opciones y para evaluar el valor que generan frente al riesgo. Aplicaban un caso real donde tomaron datos de un contratista pequeño de Carolina del Sur, en un hospital dental pequeño, y con los datos de alocación de ubicación de tiempo y costo pudieron en el fondo presentar lo que nos va a mostrar ahora Glenn. You can go on, Glenn. Thank you.
Okay, next. Okay, so we assumed that insufficient study had been made of demand for dental services. And so we're starting the project over in our minds, right? And that conducting such a study could be completed by the dry-in milestone in the project master schedule. The question then is if the project should be delayed until that later start date which would, has some consequences. If the project should continue with the current estimate for dental equipment, or if options should be integrated into the project plan to enable full utilization of more accurate estimates of demand for dental services. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so the options, that alternative really includes 3 different parts. Prepare the foundation and floor plan to enable quick installation of different types and numbers of chairs, increase space, specify easily removed flooring to install equipment support, and so on. Okay, that's in preparing to use the new information, should that prove the best option, best alternative. Secondly, contract with key suppliers to deliver more chairs and other dental equipment at a given time if needed. And then lastly, initiate a study of demand for dental services to be completed at dry-in milestone. Okay.
Just a quick question before translating. What do you mean by dry-in milestone?
Oh, it's a building, and dry-in of a building is when it's weatherproof, so that you can begin inside work that's otherwise prone to damage by rain. Right.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Entonces, se plantearon, bueno, parte de esto con la asunción de que existe poco estudio para conocer la demanda, y por lo tanto está la opción de decir, me conviene más continuar con el proyecto ahora con los plazos establecidos, me conviene retrasar el proyecto hasta conocer mejor la demanda, o me conviene retrasarlo lo más posible dado que espero una mayor demanda futura. Y para eso se plantearon opciones que son 3 alternativas que permitían, que son las que van a ser evaluadas. La primera es preparar las fundaciones y el plan arquitectónico para permitir, o sea, la planta arquitectónica para permitir que se pueda instalar rápidamente los equipamientos cuando se requiera, en el fondo, o sea, es decir, preparar la cancha para poder facilitar la llegada de los equipos. La segunda es ejecutar el proyecto, pero establecer un contrato que permita en el futuro, en el fondo, entregar más sillas y otros equipos en el futuro si es que se requiera. Y la tercera era hoy día hacer un estudio de demanda, partir por ahí, y ese estudio de demanda tiene que estar completado cuando se termine la protección, a ver si me fue la palabra, disculpen, pero en el fondo la protección frente a clima y lluvia de la infraestructura, y ahí, de ahí en adelante podrán en el fondo ya tener, instalar los equipos conociendo mejor cuál va a ser la demanda. Thank you, Glenn. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, next. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, just fill it out. Okay, there's really 2 basic choices to be made, right? In the situation that we've constructed here, right? One is to roll the dice, right? And you can either win. In other words, there won't be any significant difference in the new information about demand for dental services than in the current estimate, right? Or you roll the dice and you lose, right? And if you lose, then you have to react and rework, right? You throw away some or all of what's been designed and constructed, redo the design and any prefabrication and construction, which takes time and money, okay? The option is the option. That is to reduce the cost of losing the bet. Embedding options in your schedule may be the best solution. Deciding is done by estimating the cost and time and money of options versus that of the reactive strategy, the roll the dice, right? Okay. I guess roll the dice must be common. It must be a good Spanish expression for that.
Yeah. You can say jugársela. Play along with it. Entonces, hay 2 formas de verlo. Esto, con o sin opciones. En el fondo, sin opciones, esto implica jugársela con una apuesta. Esa apuesta puedes ganarla o perderla, dado cómo tú hayas hecho tu estimación de demanda. El problema es que si lo pierdes, tienes que rehacer trabajo y además incorporar recursos adicionales para hacer trabajo adicional. por lo tanto, en el fondo hay una pérdida esperada de tiempo y de dinero. Por otro lado, podemos reducir el costo de perder la apuesta si es que incorporamos opciones en el plan, y esas opciones nos puedan decir en etapas futuras, durante la ejecución del proyecto, si podemos estimar mejor la demanda y tomar una mejor decisión en términos de costo y opciones. Entonces, en vez de ser reactivos, con esto podemos dilatar un poco la decisión y así disminuir la incertidumbre de esa decisión. Thank you, Glenn.
Yep, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so from the Robinson Martin schedule for that project, we identified with their help, right, which ones would be impacted by any change in the dental surgery, right? And then those, the next one, please. So, and then those you can see under sub-project activity, that column, that's those same numbers, those same schedule items, right? And what we wanted to do was to estimate then for each of them, and then for the sums, the cost in time and money. This is for time, this is duration of activities. And so you can see that for the very first one, number 8, we had for case 1, which is roll the dice and win, yeah, a time duration of 0.25, and those are units, each of which equal 33 days. Okay, we just to simplify the numbers. And then for case 2, roll the dice and lose, we have 3 different categories. The first, you do it just the same as in case 1, 0.25, but then it takes the same amount of time they've helped us estimate, right, to undo it and then to redo, to do the changes that come from responding to the new information about dental services demand. Okay. Now, case 3 has the same, it just happens to have the same initial duration, but you're not actually doing everything, right? But you don't have any rework. So the 0 duration for react, if you will. But if we look at the columns and look at the sums underneath, see, we have a total, let's see if I should have this on the slide, but I just realized this morning that I didn't. So we have 2.25 units of time for case 1, roll the dice and win. We have the sum of these 2.25, 2.5, and 2.2 if we roll the dice and lose, right? And that's a sum of 6.95, almost 7, right? And then for case 3, we have 1.5 plus 1.4, which is 2.9, okay? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can I translate it first?
No, okay. Do the previous slide first.
Okay, entonces, esta matriz tiene 3 casos. El primer caso es donde jugamos la apuesta y ganamos, ¿ya? En el caso que ganamos, van a ver en la primera columna una serie de duraciones de actividades. Estas se van sumando y dan una duración del proyecto de 2,25 unidades de tiempo. Una unidad de tiempo es aproximadamente un mes, entonces estamos hablando de 2 meses y un tercio, más o menos. En el caso número 2, tenemos en el fondo la sumatoria de lo que pasa secuencialmente producto de que yo pierdo la apuesta. Entonces, primero hago todo el proyecto, me tomo estos 2,25 días, luego tengo que rehacer trabajo, es decir, partir por eliminar elementos de la arquitectura o de la infraestructura que no me sirvieron, y eso me toma aún más tiempo, es decir, otros 3 meses adicionales, y finalmente rehacer con el nuevo programa arquitectónico los cambios que se necesiten, y eso me toma de nuevo prácticamente 2 meses adicionales. Por lo tanto, si mirábamos en el fondo, esto lo llevamos simplemente a meses, para hacer un ejemplo más rápido de la traducción. Si teníamos 2 meses, en el caso si es que ganábamos la apuesta, si perdíamos teníamos prácticamente 7 meses. Y el caso 3 tiene la matriz de opciones. Esta matriz de opciones parte con una primera etapa donde hago las cosas hasta poder dilatar la decisión final de cuál va a ser el programa arquitectónico para poder instalar el equipamiento. En ese momento voy a tener mayor certeza de la demanda y mayor certeza de la capacidad que necesito instalar, y por lo tanto reduzco la segunda parte porque no hago retrabajo, y eso en el fondo Al final, si lo comparamos con el caso 1, son 3 meses con esta matriz de opciones versus 2 meses en el caso original, pero en el fondo es bastante más corto que el caso 2, que era la probabilidad de perder la apuesta, en que me demoraba 7 meses. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. Okay, next. Okay, so here we look, I'm not going to show the detail for calculating project cost, but as you can imagine, it's very similar to the previous one, right? But we look at the total for impact on project duration in the top row for case 1, 2, and 3, right? And then the same for total project cost changes in case 1, 2, and 3. So if we roll the dice and win, we spend $75 million. If we roll the dice and lose, we spend $86.7 million. If we pay for options, we increase our cost by 1.6 million, but we avoid the cost of the difference between 76.6 and 86.7, right? Which is about $11 million, right? Okay, and you see in the similar difference, in fact, even a bigger difference a little bit in terms of time, right? So if we roll the dice and win, we spend 20.8 units, which is, let me see, I can calculate. Oh, I know. Click again, advance again. So, and again. Okay, so just to put those together, for case 2, the case of roll the dice and lose, we're adding 155 days to the project. If we buy the option, we add 22 days. Okay, in the case for if we roll the dice and lose, we spend 11.7 million more dollars to do the project. If we buy the options, we spend 1.6 million more. Okay, so what I hope to provide here is I really want to caution you that you have to calculate the benefits of the options relative to the cost of doing otherwise, right? Okay. What's the penalty for uncertainty? What's the degree of uncertainty? Is there anything else you can do to make that probability of bad news emerging better for you, right? So in the next case you might find that the options are either more expensive than rolling the dice and losing, or not sufficiently less, right, to make it worthwhile. So, but what I hope to have provided is a method for calculating whether options, the worth of options in managing uncertainty on projects. Okay. Okay, now we change topics. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You have to have your turn. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll try to do it fast. En la matriz anterior estábamos viendo el costo agregado, o sea, el costo adicional de trabajar con estos casos. Recordemos, el caso número 1 es hacer la apuesta y ganar. Caso número 2, hacer la apuesta y perder. Caso número 3 es utilizar opciones en vez de simplemente jugársela con una estimación inicial. Entonces, en el caso 1, el proyecto costaba casi 21 millones, o sea, tomaba casi 21 unidades de tiempo. Vemos que en el caso 3 el aumento es poquito, versus que en el caso 2, en el fondo, la oportunidad de perder implicaba añadir 155 días al proyecto. Por lo tanto, los 22 días eran bastante más previsibles y bastante más deseables. Y en el caso del costo del proyecto, en el fondo, haber perdido la apuesta implicaba un costo adicional de 12 millones, mientras que haber tomado las opciones costaba 1,6 millones.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So now we're changing to the topic of master control schedules, right? And I just want to say a few words before I show you the slide. So construction projects, this is my position. I don't think it's just mine, but it's important to understand at least what the presupposition is for the advice I'm going to give. So construction projects need to be able to calculate the critical path through logic networks, but they do not need to generate a detailed schedule from project start to finish in order to fix an end date. That can be done using historical data and experience to produce a major milestone schedule with long lead items and options, if appropriate, embedded. The problem with CPM scheduling is the goal of providing the exact pathway from start to finish, which violates what we know about such forecasts, that the forecast error increases with forecast period, how far in advance you're forecasting, planning, and with the level of detail. Okay. Okay, click. So the rationale is calculating the critical path is useful, but assuming that a pathway to objectives can be fixed and made to happen in exactly that way is foolish, is reckless. The probabilities are simply against you, right? So if some people are so happy, they're so in love with gambling that they really like just throwing the dice, but I like winning. Okay. All right. So click again. So the advice is to use the stochastic planning method of postponement. Stochastic planning is planning with in conditions of uncertainty, right? So then, and options are a part of that toolkit, that tools kit of stochastic planning, but postponement is also a part of it. So limit master control schedules to major milestones, start dates for procuring long lead items and options. Plan in greater detail, phase by phase, collaboratively with those working in each phase. And this advice has been standard advice in the last planner system since 1993, but it is rarely followed. Okay. I want to take away the possibility of not following that and saying that you're doing last planner system and lean.
Estos son consejos que son estándares en el sistema de las planes desde el 93 y Glenn nos indica que no puedes estar implementando el sistema de las planes si no estás siguiendo estos consejos. Estos consejos dicen primero que no se puede utilizar el camino crítico asumiendo que todos los objetivos son específicos y van a pasar exactamente como está asumido en el camino crítico, sino que se recomienda usar un enfoque estocástico de planificación donde podemos posponer ciertas decisiones. Entonces, trabajar con hitos, esos hitos en el fondo a futuro nos van indicando momentos donde podemos ir actualizando nuestras opciones, posponiendo ciertas decisiones y planificando en mayor detalle fase por fase. En cada una de esas fases nos incita que tenemos que colaborar con todos los que trabajan en la fase y que de lo contrario en el fondo no estaríamos siguiendo los principios de los planes. Thank you, Glenn. You can go on.
Okay, next one. So here we're changing again to another topic, and that's the topic of workable work breakdown structures, right? And the reason we use work breakdown structures is to achieve the benefits of an assembly line in construction work, and that is to increase the throughput rate. And you do that by making the work flow more quickly, right? So, so previous to this 2020 benchmark, the last planner system had made no recommendations concerning specific types of work structure. But now we're recommending that location-based work structures be used in all phases of work for which they're appropriate, okay? And one of the recommendations for future research is to explore ways to extend that applicability where it is beneficial, right? So, so here we're looking at a photograph of a assembly line for automobiles. And I think you all know how that works. We see different workers doing different tasks on the cars as they slowly move past them, right? In a typical automobile assembly plant, a fully assembled car is produced every 60 seconds, every minute, okay? That's the throughput rate, right? So we want to get the benefits of that in construction, but the challenge is that in construction, the product being assembled eventually becomes too large to move past workers, so workers have to move through the product. And that is done through location-based work structuring with tools like the flow lines of location-based management and the tack zones in tack planning. The basics are the same for cars and buildings. You sequence the assembly tasks, you group them so that all tasks in each group can be completed in roughly the same amount of time, your chosen tack time. Have crews of workers with the skills needed to do each group of tasks move through the building or the bridge or whatever it is, right, in the prescribed sequence, each adding to what was done before them. Some design work can also benefit from location-based work structures. For example, room data sheets and detailed engineering, and possibly more. Right? So in our industry, we've tended to focus on resource
Can I
utilization.
interrupt you there because I'm
Yes,
looking
please.
Entonces, no, Glenn nos indica que antes no habían recomendado formas de estructurar el trabajo y en la guía del 2020 ya se está estructurando mediante el mismo concepto del throughput o la secuencia de producción de, por ejemplo, en los casos de industria manufacturera como los autos, donde cada 1 minuto está saliendo un auto y ese es tu tiempo de ciclo. Por lo tanto, buscamos en el fondo mediante planificación basada en ubicación, que es la recomendación del nuevo en el fondo benchmark, es que utilicemos planificación basada en ubicación en todos los lugares y etapas donde sea posible para alcanzar en el fondo este tiempo de ciclo. Sin embargo, tiene el desafío que es que mover las personas a través del producto. Para eso hay que establecer las líneas de flujo, las zonas rítmicas que se van a identificar, la secuencia en que se van a abordar esas zonas rítmicas, ordenarlo en base a ordenar la capacidad de las cuadrillas en base al tiempo que se busca y luego ajustar las cuadrillas en secuencia y nivelarlas para mantener ese ritmo de trabajo constante. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. I think you've taken on a hard job here. Okay. So in our industry, we've tended to focus on resource utilization, not on workflow. That resource utilization is, for example, the percentage of time that construction equipment is being used productively, or the percentage of paid labor time spent productively. And that's interesting, but we've neglected the utilization of the building or bridge, meaning how much time goes by without this or that part being assembled to other parts. Such delays increase with the size of transfer batches, the release of work and workspace from one trade to the next. Okay, so I want to go ahead, do that, and then I'll go ahead.
Entonces, en construcción nos focalizamos en el control de recursos, de uso, tasa de uso de recursos, no en la ubicación y en las zonas que se está trabajando. Entonces no nos fijamos cuánto tiempo un elemento o zona queda sin trabajo y por lo tanto en el fondo no estamos mirando el tiempo de entrega entre que una persona deja o entrega un trabajo previo y otra persona la continuidad o la siguiente cuadrilla el toma. You can go ahead now, Glenn.
Okay. Yeah, I might say just around transfer. I'm not sure how you translated transfer batch, but it's in. If you think about that that automobile assembly line, it's the speed of the line, right? How fast is that line moving, right? And if you
Es
can speed it up,
el tiempo que toma avanzar con los lotes de producción. Cada cuánto soy capaz de avanzar un lote completo o una zona de ejecución en este caso.
So if you can speed it up without undue risk, without taking on more defects and rework and delays and breakdowns, then obviously you increase your throughput rate, right? So you could produce more than 60 cars per second. Okay, so there's different types of location-based work structures, and I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about an example of line of balance. One of the three, really the next three, short interval planning, block scheduling, and even flow production, are all different names in use for existing practices. They're really the same practice with different names, but I'll show you an example of one of those. And then tack planning. So there's really three options: line of balance, let's call block scheduling, and tack planning. Okay, and they differ basically in the extent of repetition and the ability to adjust capacity. Okay, that's what they're responsive to, your choice of one or the other. So let's see, here, before I go too far. Okay. So in more detail, by the way, I don't have time to do this in like I would do in a classroom, right? But you can see more detail on this in that 2020 benchmark. So let's go to go ahead and present this one. Sorry. Camilo, go ahead.
I was muted, I'm sorry. Vamos
no,
a
no
hablar de
problem.
3 formas de planificar, en este caso, basado en ubicación. La primera es mediante líneas de balance para programas repetitivos. La segunda es planificación por bloques o intervalos de corto plazo, de tal manera de estabilizar los batches de producción. Los batches son los lotes de producción. Y la tercera es la planificación rítmica, que en inglés se denomina track planning. La decisión depende de la capacidad de repetición y de la capacidad para ajustar los recursos o la productividad. Dale, Glenn. Go ahead, Glenn.
Okay, next one. Okay, so first, the line of balance method. I think most of you are probably familiar with it. Perhaps everyone is familiar with it. One of the most famous historical examples is the Empire State Building. This shows how they applied line of balance to the management of and construction of the fabrication, delivery, and direction of structural steel, which obviously is an important driver of speed and progress of the project for the entire project, especially a tall building. Location-based management, which you may know by name, is built on line of balance, and the line of balance systems buffer with time, space, and workable backlog, which you might call planned buffers, right? But they don't buffer capacity, right? Okay, and so that you're trying to figure out what you're trying to preserve and what you're trying to use as you're willing to sacrifice. So this line of balance is famous, of course, for not only high-rise buildings, but also other linear projects. Usually we think of those as flat rather than vertical, but it's the same thing, right? And so linear projects, examples are highways and pipelines, right? So when you can take a space, right, a length, right, and it tends to repeat itself from over as the building goes up or the pipeline extends, then line of balances will be useful. It will be more useful if there is little variation in the work density, the amount of work for between different locations, floor to floor, mile to mile, bridge to bridge, right? And if there's less variation in that the amount of capacity required, a different amount of capacity required from trade to trade in each location. So that leads us to another form. Okay, but go ahead. I'm trying to go too fast. I don't want to. I'm trying to obscure your performance. I apologize for that.
Don't worry, it's okay. I'm gonna do my best.
You're very essential.
Entonces, acá estamos viendo líneas de balance. En este caso, Glenn nos presentaba con un edificio. Nos dice, bueno, Glenn, las líneas de balance vienen de proyectos sumamente repetitivos, y un caso muy típico son los proyectos lineales, como por ejemplo una línea de instalación de tuberías, o por ejemplo una carretera, donde cada lote o pedazo que nosotros podamos sectorizar se va repitiendo en el tiempo y se repiten por lo tanto sus tareas. Porque cada línea de la línea de balance es una tarea, establece la velocidad con la que se puede ejecutar esa tarea, y también al juntar las líneas y conocer que cada pedacito se tiene que hacer una línea después de la otra, podemos ver si es que necesitamos un buffer de tiempo o un buffer de recursos. Lo que no se puede incorporar como buffer es la capacidad, porque lo cambiaríamos la línea de la pendiente. Y lo que nos dice es que en el fondo lo fundamental y donde funciona mejor esto es cuando hay pequeña variación en cuanto a la densidad y en cuanto a la cantidad de obras a ejecutar en cada pedacito. Por lo tanto, funciona mejor, por ejemplo, en carreteras, que son súper repetitivas. Funcionaría más mal en un proyecto que sea con pisos muy distintos. You can go ahead.
All right. Okay, next. Okay, so this is that middle group that I'm just going to call block scheduling for simplicity. And they are, and you can see some information about that in the text here. But they can tolerate some degree of variation in the work from one location to the next. But that variation has to be the different trades or specialists, right, that move at one after another through a location have to be able to adjust their capacity to match that demand, right? And as you can imagine, that's not what most trades would prefer. So there has to be some consideration of that, right? Some perhaps compensation system, and of course, you must make it worth their while to do it, right? Or they won't do it. So next, oh no, go ahead and say that. Sorry.
Acá es planificación por bloques, donde en el fondo se busca que cada bloque sea ejecutado con el mismo tiempo de ciclo y por lo tanto, en el fondo, si vemos, por ejemplo, en una unidad, cada fila representa el set de tareas que hay que ejecutar, son tareas secuenciales, cada tarea por una distinta cuadrilla y cada cuadrilla va avanzando de una unidad a la siguiente y por eso se genera esta como curva pendiente. Lo que hay que buscar es cómo nivelar la capacidad y las cuadrillas tienen que atender a nivelarse en el fondo al ritmo que se requiere. Si va muy rápido o muy lento van a desbalancear este gráfico.
Okay, next one. So here's an example of block scheduling. It was used by Hensel Phelps on the Pentagon renovation project and interrupted, by the way, by the 2001 crash of an airplane into one of the buildings, one of the sections that had to be rebuilt. And but this project, you see just a little bit about how they divided it into big chunks and then smaller chunks within the big chunks, right? And doing so required, as I said already, that the different trades following one another had to adjust their capacity to make sure that they could complete the work in their location within the allowed amount of time, right? But doing so made this project complete much more quickly. I've forgotten what the exact numbers are, but it's something like a 3-to-1 compression. So yeah, very.
Entonces acá hay un ejemplo del Pentágono donde partieron por dividir el proyecto en 5 grandes sectores. Después cada uno de esos sectores se dividió en las fases que están a la derecha en colores. Son 8 fases. Y si se fijan, no todas las fases tienen el mismo tamaño, por lo tanto era súper importante que las cuadrillas fueran ajustando su capacidad de producción al cambiar de una fase a otra, de tal manera de mantener el tiempo de ciclo y mantener, por lo tanto, el tiempo de producción estable, y eso les permitió a ellos, en el caso del Pentágono, pese a que se interrumpió por el atentado del 2001, les permitió reducir más o menos en 3-1 el tiempo requerido para poder ejecutarlo. Ahora lo más difícil de esto era balancear los ritmos de trabajo de las cuadrillas a medida que se iban moviendo de una fase a la otra, dado las diferencias de condiciones. That's all, Glenn.
Okay, next one. So the type of location-based work structure that seems to be best adapted to variation in work content, right, is task planning. And a difference is that because it's so much dependent upon detailed planning in advance, right, so that you're not and that means involving the trades, involving the disciplines, the engineering disciplines, and so on. And so it's that's done. Obviously, we recommend that be done in any case, but in this case, it's absolutely necessary in order to produce a successful and executable plan. But if you do it, you can basically approximate the benefits of an assembly line in construction, even if every car is different, right? Okay. So in this case, task planning buffers with capacity, space, that is tax zones unoccupied during a time period, and workable backlog. It does not buffer with time. Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay. That's an oversimplification, but generally speaking, that's true.
Esto es una explicación bastante simplificada, pero en el fondo lo que nos dice Glenn es que una forma simple de verlo es que esto es lo más cercano a aparecerse una línea de producción de manufactura, donde se planifica en mayor detalle que los otros dos, dado que los buffers no son de tiempo como en los casos anteriores, sino que los buffers son de capacidad, es decir, de cuánta gente o recursos pueden involucrar en cada tarea. Lo que se hace es todo correlativamente detallar más el programa que en los otros casos, establecer una secuencia y establecer dónde están los quiebres de ciclo, es decir, los pasos que hay que esperar, de tal manera que en el fondo se siga una secuencia continua en ambas direcciones, a diferencia de las otras dos que solamente toman un eje de la secuencia continua, en este caso toman los dos al mismo tiempo. Es la más difícil, pero es la que permite mayores beneficios si me la des una línea de producción. Esa es como una sobresimplificación que nos mencionaba Glenn.
Okay.
All good.
Okay, this is the last topic. Apply capacity first to critical tasks. This is a rule or principle, right? A guide to behavior that has not been explicitly articulated. In fact, when I first developed the system, I assumed that last planners would just naturally apply capacity first to critical tasks. But that involves some other assumptions, right? First, that they know what's critical, right? And I also assumed that if they didn't do that, they didn't follow that rule, that their supervisors would correct it, right? Would say, no, this is critical and that's not critical. Why are we spending labor hours where it's not needed yet, right? And so one of the 5 task teams that did research and developed recommendations that are embedded in the 2020 benchmark looked at metrics. And obviously their fundamental job in my mind, the reason I suggested we have a metrics team, is that extending Last Planner system to managing the entire project and not only production involves having different metrics, right? You need different kinds of information. And they developed a number of different metrics, all useful, but I'm just going to talk about one of them, commitment level. And commitment level, that metric measures the percentage of required tasks that is critical in the CPM sense of critical, right? That have been committed on weekly work plans. Anything less than 100% triggers a search for reasons. Are we short of capacity? Is that why we didn't apply capacity to all critical tasks? Or perhaps some required tasks, critical tasks, were not made ready, right? If either of these apply, that triggers countermeasures, including replanning to overcome the delay, but also going back into the make ready function in order to see why in the world did we have this problem and how did it get passed? What can we do to avoid having this kind of problem this late in the execution of a scheduled task, right? So, but if neither of these apply, if we have sufficient capacity, right, and all required tasks.
Glenn, I need to interrupt you because I'm losing the idea.
Okay.
It's gonna be fast. Entonces Glenn nos habla de cómo analizar en el fondo las tareas críticas, si están metiendo recursos específicamente en las tareas críticas, y nos dice que al principio con el sistema de los planes no había una propuesta formal de esto, una propuesta explícita, porque se asumía que las personas iban a primero priorizar aquellas tareas críticas y en segundo lugar conocer qué es lo que es crítico o no. Sin embargo, se han dado cuenta que no siempre los proyectos se cuestionan cuáles son las actividades realmente críticas y tampoco le asignan prioridad. Entonces se sugiere tener métricas y equipos que analicen esa información para ver si estamos siendo capaces de llevar a cabo primero aquellos elementos críticos del programa, y nos propone un indicador que es el nivel de compromiso. El nivel de compromiso es el porcentaje de tareas críticas comprometidas. Es decir, si tenemos 10 tareas críticas, ¿cuántas de esas forman parte de nuestros compromisos semanales? nos dice que cualquier cosa bajo 100% implica buscar una causa de no cumplimiento o por lo menos una causa raíz que implique ver cómo estamos planificando, ver cómo estamos preparando el trabajo o por qué razón no estamos siendo capaces de ejecutar esas tareas críticas. You can continue, Glenn.
Okay, I'm really through here. I just, this metric is a way of measuring whether the rule is being followed, right? And it might not be followed because if they don't know what's critical, obviously that's a problem, right? So then they can't follow the rule. So we need to know that quick, right? And do something about it. If they're not following it, if we're not applying capacity to some critical tasks because they weren't made ready, we certainly need to know that also and do something about it as quickly as possible, right? So I urge you, recommend that you look at that. It's called LPS metrics, and it's published in the Lean Construction Journal and from 2020. And there's a discussion there of other additional metrics. Okay, so the last one. So thoughts about what needs to be done. I mean, I recognize that, and I say in the 2020 benchmark that this extension of the last planner system to managing planning and control of the entire project is done in principle. It's a declaration of intent, right? But there are many things that need to be done or be done better. And here's some thoughts about those. Click. Better understand how to use project execution planning to assess the feasibility of delivering a project. And I think there's lots of opportunity here, right? Second, better understand how to identify and mitigate project risks and how to identify and exploit project opportunities. One of the weaknesses in normal traditional practice is that it tends to focus only on risk and not on opportunities. But given the dynamic character of the typical project, right, especially more complex and uncertain projects, you have to be able to exploit opportunities in order to deliver the project to targets. If you want to interrupt and do something, say it now, there's going to be 8 of them. So we could take them in pairs.
All right, and Glenn, I'm being asked to tell you that we have just 1 minute left.
1 minute, okay.
Yeah.
Better understand when, and so should you, why don't you just bring it all up and then just translate what's on the screen?
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
Entonces, bueno, con respecto a lo primero que decía es la métrica esta que nos presentó a nivel de compromiso es útil para autoevaluarnos, si conocemos lo que es crítico, si lo priorizamos, si lo preparamos, si somos efectivos para ejecutarlo, nos recomienda leer las Planning System Metrics de Lean Construction Journal y tratar de adaptar el nivel de compromiso. Ahora, con respecto a esto, lo primero es entender mejor cómo usar la planificación de la ejecución de proyectos para evaluar la viabilidad de poder entregar el proyecto, ¿ya? Que nos concentremos en el análisis de viabilidad. Lo segundo, que nos concentremos en cómo poder identificar y mitigar los riesgos y cómo poder identificar y explotar mejor las oportunidades, ¿ya? Con este foco de los riesgos, las opciones que estábamos viendo y dilatar las decisiones. Lo tercero es entender cómo y cuándo podemos ocupar opciones en los proyectos, en los planes de proyectos. Lo tercero es demostrar que los programas de método de camino crítico no son necesarios para poder fijar las fechas de término, ya que en el fondo tienen este concepto de ser muy fijos, muy detallados y muy como estáticos. Entender que cuándo usar qué información para poder establecer planes basados en ubicación y esta estructura basada en la ubicación, entender las oportunidades para usar planificación basada en ubicación, en la fase de diseño de los proyectos desde antes de ejecución, entender la práctica, práctica corriente, práctica actual y las oportunidades de mejora con respecto a la regla de primero incorporar recursos a las tareas críticas. Entonces entender cómo estamos con respecto a esta priorización de las tareas críticas y la asignación de recursos a ellas. Y la octava, the last one, si se necesita realmente programas del método de camino crítico y en este caso, en qué circunstancias y para qué propósito. O sea, cuestionarnos cuándo estamos utilizando el camino crítico, por qué. That was the 8.
Okay, so I want to extend an invitation to industry practitioners and consultants to share with me what they know or what they learn about these different needs, and that for academics to please direct your graduate students to these research needs. Right, so these are juicy topics that would be really beneficial to our industry if we could answer them. So thank you very much for your attention. Apologies for going over.
Una invitación final de Glenn a los que estén utilizando el sistema Last Planner a compartir con él sus reflexiones y su experiencia respecto a estos 8 tópicos, y a los académicos también a invitar a sus alumnos a abordar algunos de estos 8 tópicos que conversamos.